The streets of Istanbul were alive with the noise of evening traffic, yet there are moments when even a city that never sleeps seems to hold its breath. The sun was slowly setting, painting the Bosphorus in shades of gold and crimson, and the old stone walls of the buildings reflected a warm, fading glow. People hurried along, lost in their own worlds, unaware that in the middle of this crowded city, two souls were about to collide with the weight of their past. Demet walked quickly, her thoughts elsewhere, until her steps froze. Just a few meters ahead, her eyes locked onto a figure she thought she would never see again. Her heart skipped, her breath caught in her throat, and the crowd around her disappeared into nothing. It was him. It was Can. Time stopped. Everything around her blurred, as if the city itself had stepped aside to allow this moment to happen. And then, his eyes. Those eyes she once knew so well, the ones she thought she had buried deep in memory, were staring right back at her. She couldn't look away. Not this time. I couldn't look away, she whispered silently to herself, feeling her pulse race as if it were years ago, when everything was still unbroken. Because his eyes, they weren't just eyes. They were stories. They were apologies. They were words he never said but she had always longed to hear. In those eyes, Demet saw everything she had been running from, the nights she cried alone, the mornings she woke hoping for a message that never came, the ache of silence that stretched for years. His eyes carried all of it. And yet, beyond the regret and pain, there was something else, something that terrified her even more. A truth trying to escape. A confession he could no longer hide. The silence of that moment didn't just belong to the present. It reached backward, dragging Demet into memories she had tried so hard to bury. As she stood frozen in place, looking into Can's eyes, it was as if the years between them collapsed into nothing, leaving her vulnerable once more. Suddenly, her mind was filled with flashes, bright, fleeting images of what they once had. She saw laughter spilling out during late-night conversations, the comfort of his hand brushing hers in crowded places, the fire in his eyes when he spoke about dreams that felt limitless when they were together. Back then, life had felt like a story without an ending, as though the universe itself had written them into each other's destinies. But then came the silence. The kind of silence that cuts deeper than words ever could. The day he walked away still burned in her memory. There had been no explanations, no fight, not even the closure of goodbye. Just a door closing softly, leaving her with questions that never found answers. Nights turned into years, and still, his absence haunted her. She had tried to move on, convincing herself that time would heal. She smiled in public, laughed in front of friends, but deep inside, she carried the shadow of a wound that refused to close. Every unanswered phone call, every message that was never sent back, every empty promise lingered in her heart. Now, looking at him, those years of emptiness came crashing back all at once. The distance, the silence, the painful reality of being left behind, it was all written across his face. His eyes reflected regret, but also something else, something she could barely bring herself to believe. Could it be longing? Could it be love, still alive after all this time? Her breath trembled. She wanted to ask him everything, why he left, why he never returned, why he let her drown in silence. But words failed her. The questions got stuck in her throat. All she could do was stand there, heart racing, as his eyes begged her to listen to the confession he had held back for so long. And in that moment, Demet realized something she never admitted before: she had never truly stopped waiting. Deep down, against her own will, a part of her had always believed this day would come. The day when Can would finally stand in front of her, unable to hide, unable to keep his truth locked away. The street between them felt endless, yet unbearably close. Demet's steps faltered, her body torn between running away and moving forward. She hadn't prepared for this. She had rehearsed it countless times in her mind, what she would say if she ever saw him again, the anger she would unleash, the calm mask she would wear. But none of those rehearsals mattered now. When reality hit, she was left defenseless. Can stood still, as though the world itself had commanded him not to move. His tall frame was familiar, yet different. Years had carved themselves into his face, lines of struggle, shadows of nights without rest, but his eyes remained the same. Those eyes, the ones that once pulled her into a universe where only they existed, still had the power to undo her with a single glance. Demet swallowed hard, her throat dry. The noise of the city swirled around them, cars honking, people laughing, the sound of vendors calling out on the street, but none of it reached her ears. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. She tried to look away, to break free from the spell, but it was impossible. His gaze held her captive, speaking louder than any words could. For the first time in years, their eyes met without hesitation. And in that silent collision, everything they had tried to bury resurfaced. The love, the betrayal, the longing, the questions, all of it rose like a tide that neither of them could stop. Demet's lips parted, as if to speak, but no words came. What could she say? How could she fit years of heartbreak, sleepless nights, and unanswered prayers into a single sentence? She lowered her eyes for a brief moment, but the weight of his stare pulled her back up again. Can's chest rose and fell with a sharp breath. He looked as though he wanted to step closer, but something held him back, fear, guilt, or maybe the knowledge that once he spoke, there would be no return. His silence was deafening, yet his eyes were screaming. They screamed apologies, they screamed regret, they screamed the confession he had been carrying all these years. Demet felt tears sting her eyes. Not because of the pain, though it was there, but because she could see it now, clearly for the first time, he had suffered too. The man who had walked away hadn't been free of the weight. He had carried it, hidden it, and now it was written all over his face. And then, just as her knees threatened to give way, he moved. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Can took a step toward her. That single step was enough to change everything. It wasn't just a step on a crowded Istanbul street. It was a step into the past, into the truth, into the words that had never been spoken. Demet froze. Her heart whispered what her lips could not, his eyes said everything. For what felt like hours, they stood there, two people surrounded by a restless city, yet trapped in a stillness that belonged only to them. The crowd brushed past, unconcerned, unaware that a silent war was being fought in the space between two pairs of eyes. Demet's chest rose and fell unevenly. Every second that passed without words cut deeper than any blade. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but her voice betrayed her. Her silence was born not of strength, but of fear, fear that the truth might hurt even more than the years of waiting. Can's gaze softened. His eyes, which once carried fire and unshakable confidence, now shimmered with something fragile, hesitation, vulnerability, even shame. It was as if the weight of unspoken words pressed down on him, forcing his shoulders to bend under their burden. And then, finally, the silence cracked. The sound of his voice, low and trembling, shattered through the barrier she had built around her heart. Just one syllable, but it was enough to awaken every memory, every touch, every promise that had lived between them. Her breath hitched. She clutched the strap of her bag tightly, grounding herself, because she knew, whatever he was about to say, it would change everything. Can closed his eyes for a moment, gathering courage, before meeting her gaze again. I never stopped thinking about you. The words spilled out, raw and unpolished, as though they had been locked inside for too long. Demet's heart clenched painfully. Those were the words she had imagined hearing 1,000 times in her dreams, and yet now that they were real, they cut her open. She wanted to believe them, but another part of her screamed, if you never stopped, then why did you leave? Why didn't you come back? Why did you let me drown in silence? Her lips trembled, but no sound came. She didn't need to speak, her eyes demanded the answers. And he knew it. He could see every unspoken question written across her face, as clear as the tears threatening to fall. Can's voice cracked again. I left because I thought it was the only way to protect you. But it was a lie. I wasn't protecting you, I was running from myself. The confession hung heavy in the air, fragile yet powerful. Demet's knees weakened, but she stood her ground. Because in that moment, for the first time, he was no longer hiding. His eyes had already confessed the truth. Now, his words were finally catching up. The words lingered in the air, trembling between them like fragile glass that could shatter at any moment. Demet's eyes widened, searching his face for even the slightest sign of dishonesty. But there was none. His expression was raw, stripped of all the masks he had worn for so many years. Can took another step forward. His hand shook slightly, as though his body carried the weight of everything he had hidden. I told myself leaving was the right choice. That if I stayed, I'd only hurt you. That you deserved someone stronger, someone who wasn't battling the storms I carried inside me. His voice broke, each word spilling out like a confession he could no longer contain. Demet's throat tightened. She had waited so long to hear something, anything, that explained his silence. And now, the truth was unraveling before her. Still, the pain did not ease. In fact, it cut deeper, because it proved what she had always feared: he hadn't left because he stopped loving her. He had left because he loved her too much, and didn't know how to stay. I thought walking away would free you, Ken continued, his voice low and strained. But all it did was chain me to the emptiness I created. Every night, I closed my eyes and saw yours. Every morning, I woke up wishing I had turned back that day. I told myself I was strong enough to forget you, but I was wrong. I never forgot. Not for a single day. Demet's eyes burned, her vision blurred with tears. Her chest ached under the weight of every syllable he spoke. She had dreamed of this moment, imagined it in 1,000 different ways: angry confrontations, bitter words, even cold indifference. But never this. Never such naked honesty, never such a fragile confession laid bare before her. Her voice finally escaped her lips, trembling and broken. Then why didn't you come back? All those years, why didn't you come back to me? The question hung heavy, slicing through the thin thread of hope still binding them. Ken swallowed hard, his jaw tightening as he fought the tears threatening to fall. Because I was a coward. Because every time I wanted to, I told myself you deserved better. And because I thought, maybe you had moved on. Maybe seeing me again would only rip open wounds I had already caused. Demet's breath caught. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him how wrong he was, how she had never truly moved on. But all she could manage was a whisper. His eyes said everything. For in that moment, she didn't need his words anymore. His eyes, those eyes that once held her world, already confessed what his voice was too late to say. He had never stopped loving her. He had never stopped carrying her inside him. And yet, the question still lingered like a storm cloud: was it too late? The confession still echoed in the air, wrapping itself around Demet like an invisible chain. Her heart pounded so violently she thought it might give her away. Tears clung to her lashes, threatening to fall, but she held them back with everything she had. Can's words had finally broken the silence of years, but it was his eyes, his relentless, burning eyes, that refused to let her breathe. Every flicker, every tremble, every shadow in his gaze screamed the truth he could no longer deny: he still loved her. Demet's lips trembled, yet no words came. She wanted to demand more, to rage against the years he had stolen from them, but something inside her refused. Because when she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw the same emptiness she had carried in her own soul. Her body softened, her defenses faltering. The city noise around them grew louder again, as if the world had finally remembered to keep moving. But for Demet and Can, time remained suspended, trapped in the fragile moment between past and future. Slowly, without meaning to, Demet's eyes filled with the words she could not say. Forgiveness. Longing. Pain. And a love that, despite everything, had never died. She didn't need to speak. Her silence was louder than any sentence she could form. Ken understood. He always had. His chest tightened as he saw her gaze shimmering with unspoken emotions. For years, he had feared this moment, believing she would turn away, that she would hate him forever. But now, standing in front of her, he realized something he never dared hope for: she hadn't let go. Can stepped closer, his voice no more than a whisper carried by the wind. I thought I had lost you forever, but I see now, I never truly did. Demet blinked, a single tear finally escaping down her cheek. She didn't speak, because her heart was louder than her voice. In that terror, in that look, lay the truth. She had been waiting too, even if she never admitted it to herself. They stood only inches apart now, their breaths mingling in the cold night air. His confession hung between them, heavy but liberating, like a door that had finally been opened after years of being locked shut. Demet's silence was her answer. Not forgiveness, not yet. But not rejection either. It was the fragile space where love still lived, wounded but alive, waiting to see if it could be healed. The city moved on around them. Cars sped past, strangers brushed their shoulders, the Bosphorus shimmered in the distance. Yet in that small corner of Istanbul, two souls stood on the edge of something they couldn't yet define. Can looked deep into her eyes one last time, and whispered, "Your eyes, they still say everything." Demet didn't look away. She couldn't. Because in his eyes, she saw not only the pain of their past, but also the possibility of a future neither of them dared to imagine. And so, the night closed in, not with answers, but with a promise. A promise that sometimes, even after years of silence, love finds its way back, not through words, but through the confession of eyes that never learned how to forget.